Our topic today is how businesses combine stat forecast with market intelligence to win at demand planning. So this is kind of part two to what we did last week, where we talked about stat forecasting and stat modeling. And so this is the next piece or the next step of this process. First, let me introduce the Accelytics team real quick. I'm Chris Loudit. We also have with us today Matt Russell, Micah LaHood, and Rod Vialta. This is a team of our subject matter experts and certified model builders and Anaplan solution architects. Together, been working in supply chain for quite a few years. Last week, we talked about how modern forecasting systems utilize statistical algorithms to forecast base demand. We did a brief overview of Bayesian statistical methods of producing a statistical forecast. Also, we examined the Monty Hall paradox to illustrate how statistics can be counterintuitive at times and the implications that has on business practices that rely on stat models. The impact of Thomas Bayes and Bayes' theorem cannot be ignored, but today we're here to emphasize that statistical modeling is only one side of the story. The stats provide us with a baseline for forecasting demand, but the real value comes from enriching and the enrichments that we add during the process so that we can come to a final forecast. So let's jump in. Okay, so why is demand planning so important to begin with? We want to start by understanding that when compared to other resource-hungry systems and processes like ERP or BI, for example, supply chain planning systems have an outsized effect on the bottom line. In processing orders and invoices is a critical function for sure, but you don't get a competitive advantage of your competition by doing this better or faster, as all systems in this class are usually very similar. Ultimately, you're just processing orders, and there's a pretty standard approach to doing that universally. Supply chain planning systems, on the other hand, have an almost unlimited potential to help companies seize opportunities and execute better both tactically and strategically. For example, with systems that we deploy regularly, we improve customer service levels, we more efficiently manage inventory, turns, carrying costs, we have less spoilage and waste, we reduce transportation costs. And these are just a few of the many advantages that you get from supply chain planning. Now, the foundation of all these planning systems is the demand forecast. So it has to be good, and we need to properly prioritize it as a result. And this is why demand planning is such a critical function. Once you have the best forecast possible, you can feed that into other supply and production and finance and S&OP processes, just to name a few. And Anaplan, of course, helps to enable all of these use cases, anything you can imagine. So how do businesses adjust their forecast to improve demand planning? Well, there are many things that businesses need to consider when creating a final actionable forecast. We should not underestimate the importance of considering everything that could potentially affect demand, as the implications are enormous and it has a direct impact on the profitability of the business. Many critical planning processes rely on the demand forecast, so doing the best possible job and having the best process in place is invaluable. Now, here are some common ways that businesses enrich their forecasts. First off, sales team inputs. So sales team, who knows your customers better than your sales team? Upcoming promotions, retailer commitments, open orders, direct communication with the buyers. These are all the types of activities that result in improvements or more knowledge about what is going to be purchased by your customers. So sales team inputs are a big part of enrichments. New product releases, marketing macro events. Good example of that would be pandemic and the pandemic supply chain disruptions that came about as a result. Sometimes you need to make adjustments across an entire product line or across an entire region at a high level. And so that those come from those macro adjustments. We got financial constraints, constrained supply and allocations of limited inventory, risks and opportunities. These are all things that we regularly add into our demand forecast in order to improve them. And then there's also causal data streams, which help to have an effect on what the forecast is reading into the future. Those are things like world events, weather, industry data, economic indicators. We've had some customers deploy the consumer price index, for example, as a causal stream to improve forecast performance. So the final challenge is to combine everything that you have together and arrive at a consensus. So the way that businesses go about managing consensus is as important as any other step in the demand planning process. This should be a formalized business process that is simple and clear to everyone involved. It should be on a set schedule, and deadlines should be strictly managed. In Anaplan, since everyone is working on the same connected model, we are able to bring all the departments together to concentrate their efforts into a single consensus plan that is both dynamic and accessible. A good process is self-correcting, and that's enabled by paying attention to the results. So, for example, when we're measuring results, we're looking usually at things like forecast accuracy and bias, and also forecast performance and value add. The key difference between those two things is that forecast accuracy and bias is more about measuring how well the statistical models are working, whereas the forecast performance reports are geared more towards how well the enrichments are improving from the original stat baseline. So the value add of our sales team inputs, our marketing inputs, et cetera. So the measurement is the key. It's key because you can have a good consensus process, but if you're not paying attention to the results, you're not going to be able to utilize the process to improve that forecast. So now with everything that we've just talked about, you have all the pieces that you need to take your statistically generated forecast and enrich it with all the market intelligence from around the organization so that you can use the demand forecast to make better planning decisions. That's what it's all about. That's where the value add is. That's where you get the ROI and the very demonstratable ROI that you get out of Anaplan because of its power and its ability to enable these connected processes and drive consensus and incorporate your stat baseline forecast. Okay, so next up is Matt. He's going to illustrate a point about enrichments, and then we're going to follow that up with a demo by Michael LaHood. And then at the end, we've got some questions that were put together by Rod Vialta to ask the panel. So let me pass it over to Matt.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about when we were talking about this is that often we talk about a 10% lift, or we're bringing down a forecast 15%, 16%. And a lot of us live in, unfortunately, a lot of us live in Excel. I would suggest that if you're living in Excel, you really think about living someplace else. But what about further down the stream? How can we make Anaplan easier for field reps to identify in-store promotions? How does in-store promotions affect baseline history to take that out of? And so one of the solutions we found very effective is we've just provided a promotion recipe for the field service reps. So in this instance that I have here, the field service rep goes, I know I have an end cap at this door from March 1st to April 1st. And he can go in and he can mark end cap in as his improvement. And the company as a whole has decided that if we get an end cap, we expect a 10% lift over our general forecasted line. So all they're doing is identifying what they're doing. It's an end cap. It's 2 packs of hamburger buns for $5. Those types of things that can be door specific. You can allow people just to select what they're executing at the door, and then you can define how much of a lift it gets. And then as that goes into our history, we can adjust our history by taking down that same period. We see that we had an end cap going on in March. We're going to take down that history by the 10% that we expect. That's our new baseline history. And we're not going to start annualizing any end caps or any store specific activity that's going to drive volume and continue to add it back in the end. We don't have to just think about increasing or decreasing the forecast in terms of magnitude and in terms of numbers. We can assign words for word people and get very meaningful and important results from them.
Okay, great. Thanks, Matt.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Michael LaHood. Even with all the enhancements that we can do in statistical forecasting and the improvements with the new Plan IQ AI/ML statistical forecasting, we always get requests to be able to do manual overrides. So typically for our clients, we give them 3 different ways to do an override. This is a non-dimensionalized module. It was just a quick down and dirty. So a lot of our clients want the ability to either zero out a forecast, add a percent lift or decrease, or just type in a new value that they want to reach. So this module shows an example of all 3. And also you notice for the adjusted forecast, it borders in red if the adjusted forecast is less than the initial forecast. and just yellow to show that there is an override, but the override is greater than the initial forecast. We typically like to build in an approval process. So this gives the planner's manager the ability to go in and either approve or not approve particular overrides, which then leads to your final forecast: white if it doesn't change, green if the override has been accepted by the manager. Now, these overrides can be done in multidimensional modules at any level. So you can actually do this at like a location 1, P1 level, or L1, P2, L2, P1. So any variation of your dimensions, we can also do these overrides, and they will be disaggregated to lower levels of the hierarchy or aggregated to upper levels of the hierarchy. So this just gives even more detailed control for the statistical forecast in order to get your final constrained consensus forecast.
Awesome. That looks really good. Yeah, and I know that we do these in every different project a little differently, depending on the needs of the client and the customer. But there's some universal pieces as far as the way that we give them so much flexibility and the ability to disaggregate, interact with the forecast at any level, and to really combine and really connect the departments together to do this.
All right, thank you, Chris. Rod here. First question for the panel. So, Michael, what you were showing us just now, is it possible to allow the planners to make overrides at lower levels, but maintaining the top line forecast?
Absolutely. So if we are doing overrides at a lower level, but we want to maintain, say, the top line forecast of 10,000, Anaplan can actually be designed so that it will adjust the mix at the lower level to still hold true to that top line original forecast.
Okay, fantastic. If I make a macro adjustment, right, how can I make sure when it's distributed to the lower levels of the hierarchy, it doesn't throw off my lower level forecasts? What tools does Anaplan give me for that?
So typically what we would do is we would use the statistical forecast, which is usually at the base level, to create a disaggregation percentage. And then we would disaggregate the upper levels down to the lower levels based on the original statistical forecast. That can also be based on history if the client prefers it that way.
Okay, makes sense. And then if I want to include any causal data that the sales team wants to use, such as weather conditions or on a given day, or the holiday calendar, into, say, my daily forecast model, how can this be done in Anaplan? Specifically, I want to include these as enrichments.
Anaplan recently delivered a new software package called Plan IQ, which is based on Amazon Forecast, and it's Anaplan's version of that. And it's utilizing the most recent technology with AI and ML technology built in. Those models allow you to add in any related stream of data, any causal stream of data, anything like weather, industry information, anything from CPI to other types of cost or commodity indexes, all these things added to the history that you feed into the forecast algorithm. And if there's a correlation between that data and the forecast, the model will automatically adjust the forecast based on that causal data. And some of the models will actually tell you the impact of those causal streams. So you can get explainability built into your forecast based on how much effect the causal data streams actually had, and if they're actually making a difference to your forecast. So that's one way to answer that question. I'm not sure if anybody else had another.
Yeah, I can add to that. We are actually doing requirements gathering with a client right now, and they have 2 distribution centers in Florida. So for the forecast, we're using either a 4, 8, or 13-week trending pattern that they get to select from. But for those specific distribution centers in the state of Florida, they want the ability to do time-based trending in case there is a weather event like a hurricane. Once the distribution center is back up and running, they don't want to use the prior 13 weeks if the distribution center has been down for 13 weeks based, due to a hurricane. So they want to be able to shift their trending time frame backwards to get a better trend and not include that downtime from like a weather event.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So I think we're at the end. Feel free to get in touch with us if you have any questions.
We hope you enjoyed this panel session. Be sure to check out more in our series. And if you're interested, be sure to hit subscribe and like so you can be the first to know about our next upload.